I've been a substitute teacher for 6 years, moving between schools whenever a position opens up. I thought I'd seen every strange classroom situation there was. I was wrong the week I covered for Lincoln Elementary. The regular teacher, a woman named Mrs. Ashworth, had been out for 2 weeks already by the time I arrived, according to the school office. Nobody could tell me exactly why. The secretary just said she'd taken sudden leave and hadn't specified when or if she'd be returning. The classroom itself was ordinary. 3rd grade, 22 students, colorful posters on the walls, the usual clutter of a room that had clearly been lived in by the same teacher for years. Except for one thing. There was an empty desk in the back corner, angled slightly differently than the others, facing a bit toward the window instead of the front of the class. On my first day, I asked the students if a seat was open, if I should expect a new student joining us. The class went quiet in a way that made me uncomfortable. A few kids looked at each other. One girl in the front row said very matter-of-factly, "That's Daniel's seat. He doesn't come to class anymore, but you're not supposed to move it." I asked who told them that. She said Mrs. Ashworth did, on the first day of school, and that every teacher before her had said the same thing. I checked the class roster. There was no Daniel enrolled. I checked previous year's rosters, going back as far as the school kept records. No Daniel Ashworth, no Daniel anything, in any class at that grade level for over a decade. I mentioned it to another teacher during lunch, mostly out of curiosity, expecting a simple explanation. A mix-up, a joke that had gotten passed down between students over the years. She got quiet too, in that same uncomfortable way the kids had. She told me that every substitute who worked that specific classroom eventually asked the same question, and every substitute eventually stopped asking it after the first week. I asked her what happened after the first week. She said I'd understand soon enough and changed the subject. On my 3rd day, I noticed the desk had moved. Not far, just slightly, maybe an inch, angled a bit more toward the window than it had been before. I told myself I was misremembering the exact position from earlier in the week. On my 5th day, one of the students, a quiet boy who rarely spoke, raised his hand during a reading assignment and asked if he could switch seats with Daniel, since Daniel wasn't using his window seat properly anymore. I asked him what he meant by that. He said Daniel used to look outside a lot, but now he mostly just looked at the class instead, and it made him nervous sitting so close. I laughed it off in front of the students, the way you're trained to do with a strange classroom comment, and moved on with the lesson. But that night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The following Monday I arrived early, before any students, planning to quietly move that desk back to match the others, convinced I'd simply been imagining small shifts that weren't really there. The desk was already facing the classroom directly, not the window. The room. I moved it back to its original angle myself, carefully, the way it had been on my very first day. I told myself that was the end of it. When the students arrived and took their seats, the same quiet boy from before looked toward the back corner, went pale, and asked me in a small voice why I'd let Daniel move his own desk again. I asked the boy directly, in front of the whole class, foolishly, what exactly happened to Daniel. The classroom went completely silent. Not one student answered. Several of them looked toward the empty desk instead of at me, as though checking whether it was listening. Finally, the same girl who'd spoken to me on my first day said very quietly that nobody talks about what happened to Daniel while sitting in this room. She said Mrs. Ashworth told them that talking about it while sitting in this classroom was the one rule that mattered more than any other rule in the school. I went to the principal's office immediately after class. I asked directly what had happened to a student named Daniel at some point in this school's history, in that specific classroom. The principal, an older woman who had clearly been at that school a long time, closed her office door before answering. She told me there had been an incident decades earlier involving a student in that classroom. She wouldn't give me details, no matter how directly I asked. only saying that some incidents get discussed among staff in careful, limited ways and are never, under any circumstances, discussed inside that specific room itself. I asked her why the desk was never simply removed if it caused this much ongoing disturbance among students and staff alike. She said the desk had been removed once before, years earlier, by a well-meaning substitute who didn't know any better. She said within a week, that same substitute stopped coming to work entirely and was never heard from again by anyone at the school. She said the desk was back in that classroom, in that exact corner, within days of the substitute's disappearance, and nobody on staff had any explanation for how it had gotten there or who had moved it. She told me, very directly, that my job for the remainder of the assignment was simple. Leave the desk exactly where it was. Don't ask the students questions about it, and regardless of anything I noticed, anything at all, finish my 2 weeks and let the next substitute worry about whatever came after. I finished my assignment. I never asked another question in that classroom again. On my last day, as I packed up my things, I glanced toward the back corner one final time. The desk was angled toward me directly, facing the front of the room, exactly like all the others. I could have sworn, when I'd first walked in that morning, it had still been facing the window. If you're ever asked to substitute for a classroom with a seat that everyone insists on leaving untouched, I'd think very carefully about which questions you're willing to leave unanswered and which room you're willing to ask them in.